you probably all know Andrei. Andrei is the founder and managing director of Lussmann Sustainable, and I'm sure some of you surely will have dined at one of his 4 restaurants in Hertfordshire. I wish I had, and I'm jolly well intending to when I get a chance. His menus reflect, as I've gone online and had a look, they absolutely reflect his commitment to organic food, to high welfare farming, to sustainable fishing, and where possible, sourcing local produce. To give you an idea of the menu I've just been looking at, we've got Cornish mackerel, Evesham tomatoes, wild rabbit linguine, chicory salad with Somerset used curd, and MSC fish cake, MSC hake, and MSC cod loin. I had to look up what MSC was. Andrei will explain to us, and he will help us, I hope, work out how we can be sure that we're buying certified sustainable fish. Andrei, over to you.
Thank you
for coming.
Thank you. Good afternoon. It's funny, I spent an hour and a half on the road getting here in a traffic jam. So it's funny, isn't it, really, how things are, considering where I was coming. And I hope this is not too corporate, having these banners up. I put them up thinking it's probably overkill, but you know what? If we have a new customer from today, then it makes my time worthwhile. Right, well, yeah, I'm Andrei Lussmann, and I've worked in the industry for 30 years. And I worked for various companies over the years. And in that time, before I set up Lussmann's 20 years ago, it became very clear to me that we loved the groups, we loved the chains in one sense because they were affordable, because when I grew up, it was the back of a pub for a drink and you weren't allowed in the pub or there was a Burnley Inn. So it was really quite flat and dour and miserable compared to our continental friends in Europe. Are they still our friends? I hope they are. And in regards to that, that's what I grew up in. And many people remember that's how it was. You just didn't eat out. And if you did, it was your mum's, or sorry, your grand's 70th in a hotel. And you daren't say a word. And it was all very starchy and stiff and serious. And as I grew up in the industry, I realized that we were missing an ethical alternative. So I knew about things like restaurants, you know, there were obviously vegan restaurants and vegetarian restaurants, but there weren't restaurants which were growing that provided a fair and decent fish and grill alternative. And although in some ways we've come to believe that fish and grill is almost, food of the devil and everything should be plant-based, I'd like to argue that it's all about flexibility, it's all about a measured approach in relation to food. Now, the one business which I was really impressed by was the Body Shop. Obviously not a restaurant business, but the Body Shop was something that wasn't entitled at the time in terms of its offering. It was something that you found on the high street. It wasn't designed for those who live in the Cotswolds or Notting Hill. It was quality, had a bit of style, but it had very strong ethics. And it was on the high street rather than being some bijou product in a very nice little village or town. And I thought, we don't have that, but what we do have are very good chains that provide us with accessibility to a wide demographic. We have chains that are, invariably have charming staff, so offers great opportunity for youngsters. They're consistent with their offerings, so they're very Swiss. They do things right. This is the old days, and they're not expensive. And I thought, why can't we get all those things and fuse it together with something that has an ethical standpoint or an ethical strategy? So Lussmann's was born, and it was born in a coffee shop in North Kensington. And as I'm no celebrity and my parents didn't have much money, you start off with a small coffee shop. And I started with my sister. And I think on week 2 we had a fight over a knife with a box of tomatoes. She now lives in Barcelona, and I carried on with Lussmann's. And she is a very good cook, but it's just how it is with family. So I would recommend that you don't work with your family. So she went there, and I carried on with the idea that we could do Lussmann. So being a coffee shop, we were somewhat limited. And being that it was North Kensington, it was one of those brilliant London suburbs that was very rich and very poor. Okay, so, and the two don't live together very well. They're not easy bedfellows. So not unusually, we were held up 3 times. So after being held up 3 times, I thought, you know what, I'm having enough of this. And furthermore, being that it was very wealthy and extremely entitled, you've got Holland Park and Notting Hill, we didn't have enough regulars who liked us being there. So the funny thing was, it wasn't being held up 3 times, although that was a pain. It was the fact that our customers weren't people that lived locally and used us as their local restaurant. Because London being on their doorstep, they could go anywhere at any time. So Hertford was born, and I must admit, I didn't know really much about Hertford, but I was desperate to get out. And my partner, who we're still together, she said to me, I hated living in Hertford since moving from Manchester when she was 13. She used to play the piano next door in that Quaker room, funny enough. But she did say, though she didn't want to come back to Hertford because she was an art student, she said, it'd be great for Lussmann's. So I came to Hertford, had a coffee and signed a contract, and having no idea what I was doing because I was desperate to get out of London. So I'm not going to spend the whole day talking about, obviously, my journey, but Hertford was the beginning of making an effort to put sustainable dining on the high street. In the early days, we started doing very simple things because as we're now 20 years old and now that we're opening our 5th restaurant, we've come through a huge time, a huge journey. And when I was growing up in the industry, sustainability meant food. It was all about food, ethics of farming, provenance, terroir. You know, how is the horticulture or the ground looked after? You know, what sort of meat do you buy in? And now I've come to realise that it's 30% of what I do. It's 30% of the sustainable journey. And in light of that, we also realised that in those very early days, if we were too righteous about our ethics, if we were too passionate about making our point, we probably would turn a lot of people off. Because I find that when we go out to eat, it is a time of leisure and enjoyment, and it's a time that we should appreciate being away from whatever problems we have. And sometimes you maybe are with someone you shouldn't be with. That's not my problem, all right? As long as you pay the bill, I don't mind who you're with. But those customers reminded me very clearly that actually we're not there to, bash, our fist on the Bible and be quite pious and almost pompous about our, philosophy. It was more about saying, we will start working on ethics and it'll be under the bonnet. It'll just sort of ride along the side of the restaurant. Because if you're a great restaurant, then unfortunately, more times than not, it's not the sustainability element or the ethics that brings you back. 99% of us like to go to a garage that the service is fast and the petrol's there, right? And you can get into it and park because we've got busy lives. And restaurants are no different. You want the functionality of that restaurant to be the same. It's consistent, it's accessible, they'll pick up your booking, that you'll have a nice table. So we didn't want to be a restaurant that was brilliant at ethics and then suddenly realise we can't get the rest right. Better half the artisan than a dead artisan. So over 20 years, we've sort of been going through the journey of turning what is a high street business into a very strong ethical alternative to what the high street has to offer. And as I said, there are some fantastic vegetarian, vegan, one-off independents doing great things. But with us, it was always about saying, don't eat in a chain or a group which has no ethics, have no philosophy, have no beliefs in what goes on within the business. It's all about return on investment. And eat with us, because we can do both. We can give you the best bits from the chains, and we can give you the personality, we can give you the heritage, and we can give you the sensitive thinking behind what sustainability means. Now, sustainability is a very grey word. I mean, it means 1,000 things to 1,000 people. And as I said earlier, in my original experience of starting Lussmann's, it was all about, is the meat you're using British? And if it is British, is it organic? And it was all of that sort of stuff. And it has been, for me, a massive journey of learning. And at the same time, learning in a way that we don't really want to, again, pull our customers in only because of our ethics. It's a bit like when we have live music in St Albans, some of our customers will turn around and say, can you tell those rowdy lot in the very, very front to just sort of be quiet because we can't enjoy the music? And I have to remind them that the music's for free. And if they weren't eating here, then you wouldn't enjoy it at all. And if you actually want to enjoy it that much, pay a ticket and go to Dean Street in London and get on with it. So it's a bit like that with ethics. You know, we've had to sort of get in people who don't believe in ethics, who don't actually think it's appropriate. In fact, lots of customers think that you have to wear Hessian underpants and sandals in which to be a supporter and supporter of ethics and sustainability. And I'd like to say I don't wear Hessian underpants, all right? And I've always been a believer that actually sustainability, and now it's changing, is something that, you know, involves us all, and we all come from very different types of life, and we're all from different types of commercial. We all have different commercial interests. So the whole principle was, can we, in essence, create something which is classy but classless? It offers something that is appropriate to a wide demographic. So you don't have to be extremely wealthy. You don't have to be able to drive to the restaurant, because invariably it's in the towns, you can get a train. And, you know, we'll demonstrate that by making sure that we don't do special menus. You know, lots of people say, why don't you always do these special menus? And apart from Mothering Sunday, because it's the busiest day of the year, we never do special menus. And the idea is that when you go out on New Year's Eve, what happens? You get stung for an extra 50 quid just to have a chance to have a table. Same on Valentine's Day and various other important events. So our view was, we won't do any of that, because a great locals restaurant should always be there at normal prices, rather than just be there to make the money at all cost. So, as I said, I wrote 4 points. In fact, I did my first PowerPoint yesterday. I've never done a PowerPoint in my life. And it took me 45 minutes to work my way around how to do a PowerPoint. And it took me 2 minutes to write the 4 subjects I was going to talk about. And they're here because we don't need the PowerPoint, because I can talk about it. So that's the background of Lussmann's. It was all about creating an alternative to the homogenized chain and the pompous, one-off, independent that's very expensive, and you feel as though, you know, you can't relax. And the other thing, I suppose, was restaurants are about community. They're about family. They're about coming together and enjoying a moment together. And we realised after the pandemic how important that was when we all reopened in the business. And I always felt that if you have a good coffee and a nice glass of wine and a decent plate of food, and you walk away having, you know, a great conversation, then that's all you want. Now, maybe things are changing, but we still have that idea. It's not about bringing the phone in and having an interaction with the phone. And that's why we've never done lots and lots of parties. It's always about 2s, 3s and 4s, and feeling as though it's your local, that you can rely on. Though we make mistakes, we generally get it right most of the time. So, in terms of the journey of sustainability, we started off in North Kensington with a long life organic juice. I think it would last for 3 years. And it became very clear to me that if we went out and became fully sustainable on day one, that actually we probably wouldn't last a week or a month or a year. Because even though I'd worked in the industry for 10, 12 years until I'd started my own business, it was very clear that we had to major on the cornerstone of business. And it doesn't matter what business we're in. You know, we all know that business has to rely on, this is what is on the tin, this is what we consistently provide, and our customers come back to have more. And then I started going to the market, and I started looking for meat, and then I started buying meat from the meat market. And it was things like, we'd start off with chicken that was British, you know, but then it was Red Tractor, then it was, you know, Red Tractor, and then it was outdoor reared, and then it was like what we have now, label anglais, which is which was a very good quality chicken, which you used to buy from Chris Fredericks up in Roydon. Yep, that's up the road, isn't it? Who used to sell his chicken to all the top Michelin star restaurants. And here is an example of what we were up against. When I went to see him about just chicken, and we're not talking about carbon, or we're not talking about waste, or meat, or staff, he turned around and said, that's not for you, only the Michelin star restaurants have that, like Raymond Blanc and Gordon Ramsay. And I said to him, that's all rubbish. We need to get that chicken at a normal price on the plate. And I know you can in France, but you can't do it here. And it took me 4 years of arguing this with this man. And Chris Fraser was a lovely chap. And finally we did a deal, and we've never moved away from that chicken because it's long life, longer bones, you know, better taste in the quality of the product. But most importantly, it was about the fact that the animal had a spirit, it has a life, it was outside, And we're all better for it because there wasn't the use of antibiotics and steroids and all the stuff that comes with intensively farmed meat. So, you know, in those early days, it was about looking at what we put on the plate. Beer was another example. We opened Stortford, we're not there now. That was on the eve of the last disaster we all faced in terms of 2008 to 2011. And we built a restaurant in the middle of a development, and I was promised 5 other restaurants would arrive at the development, and none of them arrived, and we were by ourselves. And it was another one of those experiences that we all learn from. But I remember in Stortford putting a beer on the menu, and it was British, craft. It was also, we had a lager, because lager, you know, we're not famous for our lagers, but we've developed, you know, a competence in that area over the last few years. And the overriding feature was, why is it not a pint and why is it not Peroni? And this is a very funny place, we're not going to come back. So, you know, it's like, God, it's so difficult, isn't it? I mean, you know, just taste it and you might enjoy it. And if you don't enjoy it, don't worry, I won't charge you. I mean, it's not rocket science, but clearly I wasn't there. How long have I got left?
15 minutes left.
Okay, we're fine.
All
right.
5 of your talk, really, but anyway, go on.
Yes, lovely. Oh, I've got 5 minutes left, right. Oh, right. Right, then, we've only got past 2 minutes of what I've got to say. Right, no, I'll bring it 5. So, okay, right, okay, so right, all right. So there have been lots of examples, and of course, you know, restaurants and the whole business of hospitality is a very interesting business because everyone loves it, and 99% of people believe they can do it, which is lovely, but 95% of restaurants close in the first year because it is the iceberg theory. What you see and what goes on, like quite often in business, is very, very different. So I'm happy to say that we're still here and we're still around. I'm making it faster. During the pandemic, I will just mention that, we did carry on going. We offered, 4 days before Boris closed us down, we created an online presence, and we asked Nick Koff, the CEO of East Harts NHS, if we could offer food, because I had 6 kitchens, I had 150 staff, which were all ready to work, furlough had not arrived. So I wanted them to be put to work, you know, because that's what we can do. And then the NHS said, yes, brilliant, because remember, the nurses weren't getting any food. You know, there was a real problem in those early days because everyone was taking food off the shelves and the rest of it. On day 2, I realised I might have to wait a little while for what the CEO says and for someone to come back to me in terms of, can we make it happen? And I was expecting it to happen in 24 hours. And obviously I'm very naive because when I work in the business, it's like we can always make it happen like yesterday. And of course that doesn't work in the NHS, which is fair enough. So we opened it to our customers, not knowing whether it would be a success or not, thinking we might sell a couple of hamburgers or whatever. Organic, of course, you know, from Wales, all proper stuff. The biodegradable packaging, we didn't let our guard down, everything was done properly, all the food waste was still aerobically digested. And in fact, we sold 100,000 meals and 600,000 dishes. And we also raised at least £2,000 for the Trussell Trust, just as a little thing we did on the side. So we kept on going. We kept the lights on mentally. We kept some of our staff engaged. And obviously, a lot of our customers said, we love what you're doing. And I was amazed by the buy-in and the very responsive relationship we had with our customers. And in fact, I ended up driving, never driven in my life, doing a delivery. I always felt that eat and delivery was the messengers of the devil. I was like, we don't do that. And there was me delivering 70 deliveries a day. And not knowing most of the customers, it was amazing how much positivity there was out there. It was a fantastic period of time for us because I'd never really come across it. Purely because I'm not on the restaurant floor all the time, and I just deal with the negative side of any business, managing broken staff or broken equipment or upset customers. So to go out there and see during the pandemic how many happy people there were and that we were doing something that they wanted, because the last thing you wanted was someone to say, you're profiteering from this nightmare, one was not sure. So, very quickly, over the last 20 years, we've realised, and I'll give you fish as an example. Fish is a very good example on the whole. We used to buy fish, locally caught, small, harbours, day boated, line caught. It all sounds wonderful. It's all beautifully labelled, fantastically sold. Has a very, it makes you feel very nice about the fish you're buying. And then I suddenly realised, actually, when MSC knocked on my door and said, most of the fish we're buying from these places actually isn't sustainable. And what does sustainability mean? It's a very grey area. And it turned out that 9% of the fish in our sea is gone. The variety of fish available is at its all-time low. We rely on and therefore, we remember the cod wars or the cod issues from a few years ago. We suddenly realised huge amounts of fish is being depleted so fast that we can't do anything about it. So when I realised the MSC, all that they did, and they're the Marine Stewardship Council, the little blue tick you see on the side of the tuna fish, on the side of the anchovies, when I realised that they could demonstrate with scientists in the water that they could verify that 91% of what is certified is actually sustainable from an area that is growing essentially faster than it's been depleted, which makes lots of sense because obviously we have issues coming up the next 20 years in terms of food security and all the rest of it. You suddenly realise, right, that makes sense. So let's just switch to these people. And in doing so, it means that we might not be buying our hake from, Brixham down in Devon. It might be coming from Norway. So there is a carbon issue there. But overall, the overall feature is we're getting fish that is growing faster than we're taking out of the water, and our diners can relax in the knowledge that Andrei, the company, has taken care of that problem. In regards to other stuff, sustainability in food, which obviously we've dealt with all of the food, from next month, all our wines will demonstrate what their sustainable credentials are in terms of either being carbon neutral, biodynamic, organic, or having a relationship with their staff and their children in Chile, etc. So from the human side. But beyond that, we have the last 10 years worked on the estate. So how do we manage our water, our power, our waste? Because that's all the ugly stuff that no one ever asks about. I mean, one doesn't go to a restaurant and say, I'll only eat with you if you recycle your waste, or if you manage the way in which you deal with your food waste. So with all that in mind, it became a very uninteresting area from a customer perspective, but very interesting from my side. And the bad news is it all costs more. And of course, trying to be a regular place for locals, you didn't want to be in a situation where you were saying to your customers, oh, we're just going to pass it on. Because I would feel as though, that's the easy thing to do, but regulars would feel as though, oh, for God's sake, maybe we can't go there after all because it's getting too expensive. So that's why we always had the set menu that carried on until 7 p.m, not 7 days a week for those who had families and didn't want to spend a huge amount of money in order to demonstrate that actually we were very good value. So today, and I'm finishing, 2 minutes. Today, we have gone through the entire ecosystem, essentially, of the business, and all our energy, for example, that was an interesting area, is all green. Now, God knows what's going to happen in the future, but it's all green, all the gas and all the power. So when we introduced all our outside heating in May, in Harpenden, in Camp Basra with the tents to get customers in, it meant that we could sit back in the knowledge that, yes, we can always reduce the power, but at least it's green. All the waste is 100% recycled. All the food waste for 15 years has been decomposted in anaerobic digestion. And we did do a sizable study into making our own compost with closed loop systems in the restaurants. One, we didn't have the space, and two, the carbon footprint of moving all the food waste to one place with a closed loop system where you create your own compost was 10,000 times more than the person who would pick it up for me to take it to a digestion centre. So we've gone through lots of experiences in trying to work out how do you make ethical and sustainable dining a commercial reality without frightening people off and without having to wear sort of Hessian underpants and not drive anywhere. And trying to get normal people, not maybe you, but people who probably don't worry about this sort of stuff. I mean, you are normal, but people who probably don't care about this sort of stuff to say, you know what, by default, we'll get you to come to us because we're charming, staff are charming, and it's not expensive, and it's a lovely place to eat. Sorry, that's it. And one final thing is that that's now left us in a position of our carbon footprint. So we're now in a situation whereby we are referencing all the relationships we have with our suppliers and the food, and not all things which are ethical and organic and sustainable chime with carbon, being a carbon neutral company. So the point for Lussmann now is to say, can we keep our welfare and our ethics with our staff and the animals and everything else, and move to a carbon neutral position, which is what we're doing now, which will take a little while.